Okay.
Welcome to BandLaunch.
Welcome to BandLaunch Week 9, is it?
Week 9.
Week 9 BandLaunch. Now, we've had to change our format a little bit. As you guys know, we're no longer live. We had to pre-record this segment so that we could maintain strict isolation with the BandLaunch crew. We're still evaluating that. We're lucky that our studio is pretty private, but there's actually nobody else in the studio, so we can keep our cleanliness protocols pretty strict, but we haven't quite
started this over 2 months ago. We started this. We're going into the third month of BandLaunch, I think.
That's right. So we've been setting up our space and being pretty careful about it, but we didn't know how careful until the last couple of weeks when the world's health seemed to be at risk. So
right.
Today's issue. This is a special issue of BandLaunch, COVID-19, and musicians. I think need to show the following traits: leadership, survival, and positive action. So these are kind of the themes that we're going through for this episode of BandLaunch. Okay. So we'll move ahead to the next slide here. We have no cameras on us right now. We're actually doing this by phone. You're going to have to be similarly creative with your band's efforts to get out there and to communicate with your fans. So sometimes you can do it kind of the way you planned, and sometimes you have to make a plan B. This is plan B for us. So BandLaunch news. We're working out some of the logistics for getting back to the studio. Our space is private, which is very good, but we haven't quite figured out all the details there to keep everybody perfectly healthy and obey all the government's suggestions.
But we do have there are bands downstairs, so you never know if some of these it used to filter in the music anyway. So.
That's right. Hopefully not the germs. I think I'm not too worried about the ventilation system. It doesn't work very well at the best of times, so I don't think it's shuffling too many germs around.
Yeah.
So we're trying to minimize contact, but still deliver a great program for you. We're also, just as a side note, because this is BandLaunch News, we're working on something that came up with, somebody phoned me up, a fan phoned me up and said they'd love to see us working on a virtual concert/telethon, a benefit for local musicians and local food workers who are all kind of surprisedly out of business at this point.
Sure, yeah. Everything, the theaters, bars, restaurants, they've all shut down, right?
In our town, they certainly have. Mm-hmm. And that is kind of the recommendation for a lot. I think it's certainly the Ontario recommendation. I'm not sure how it plays out across the country, but it's starting to, everything changes hour by hour, but it seems to be, that seems to be the way it's headed. That public gatherings are kind of do less and less. So, and that definitely includes sitting in restaurants close to strangers. That definitely includes concerts. So we're trying to keep everybody safe. But one of the ways that we could do that is now there's a whole bunch of people sitting at home, including musicians. Let's try to electronically connect them so that they can still enjoy each other's company, enjoy each other's art.
Yeah, great idea. Yeah.
Okay. So our concert timing is a little more up in the air. We haven't heard back from the venue about specific dates yet. I think we're just letting a little bit of the dust settle. We may consider a fully virtual concert depending on how long the containment kind of recommendations last. But let's see. We're going to take a little bit of a wait and see. But it may not happen in mid-May the way we sort of envisioned it. Okay, we'll move on to the next slide. Just a little reminder, we're not medical doctors, so take what we say with a grain of salt. Definitely listen to the news and listen to the advice of the medical authorities. We just are sharing our notes and annotations and thoughts, but this is not medical advice, just like our legal advice is not legal advice either. Follow the news related recommendations. Watch your sources. There's some crazy stuff out there. This seems to bring out the loonies who have conspiracy theories and things. So just be mindful of the news you eat. Plan to be a positive force. That's long been the purview of musicians. And spread the word, not the disease.
And if you can, take a mental health day. It's someone has suggested that, and I think that's a really good idea. Not to be so concerned and believing, like you said, believing everything you hear on the internet, right?
Yeah, like take a no news day, and just do something that you really enjoy. For me, I'm actually learning how to play the cello in this time, so that's awesome. Again, watch your hands. Don't. We're gonna get into the. We have a little medical thing here to go through. Just as a reminder, because it's something that's super important. Wash your hands. Don't touch your face. Cancel if you're sick. Wipe your gear down and clean your mic grills. Okay. Now, this is sort of a little philosophical direction I was going in. The times are changing. Now, one of the roles of musicians is often been just kind of question the status quo and sort of be a little bit left wing and anti-government, anti-establishment. I think that that's true, but I think at these times particular, because there is such a very serious, imminent threat to vulnerable populations, that we need to temper those kind of attitudes and those kinds of thoughts with community, with what's good for the community as a whole. Use logic and science. Don't take crazy conclusions at face value. Ask sort of where they came from and how the logic works to get to the conclusion. And music is about togetherness and caring. So taking a moral stance to say, yeah, that's what we stand for. That's very important at a time like this.
For sure. Yeah.
Okay, to be super clear, don't kill grandma.
Yeah.
You'll feel like crap if you did. That's who this is about. This is about vulnerable populations. The chances are pretty good that a healthy 20-something person is not going to die from this. They might, but depending on lifestyle especially. But grandma's the one you got to watch out for. And societies are always judged by how well they treat their weak.
And if you can, definitely, if they need groceries and you have access to a car or something like that, things that can allow them to stay at home and it can help them out that way.
That's right, and it's not just you might not be partying with Gran and give her the disease, but somebody you contact with might. So that's just common sense, is to not be a link in the chain that ultimately kills Grandma. Okay. So wash your hands like all the time. Like, I'm kind of obsessive about this, like every 10 to 20 minutes. Stay at home if you're sick. One of the things you can do is embrace your inner tortured loner artist. That's something that's a kind of a trope in the music industry, and just get into it. Get into the sadness. Get into the into the injustice.
Sure. And sometimes the thing is, people don't realize, but entertainers are usually self-employed. And it's usually on an independent level, So,
yeah, so kind of, I think everybody's a little bit on the outside of because they're isolated, but artists are normally this is their comfort zone, is being on the outside looking in at society, and there's a lot of insights. You might think back on some of your favorite lyrics, either ones you've written or ones you've grown up loving when you were little. And a lot of them are kind of tortured outsider kind of lyrics, and this is a good time to be kind of reveling in that space.
Oh, I agree, yeah.
So reschedule your concerts and sing your grandma a song over the phone if you're lucky enough to still have her around. So
some of these concerts they're rescheduling. Some artists, the established artists have tours planned for the summer, because we're in that season, spring and summer, the touring, the outdoor festivals, and now they have to cancel until September, and they still don't even know, right?
That's true. Yeah, everybody's way up in the air, so just be patient. Things will come around, and the technology. Luckily, we're here in the technology. If we were Roland and I remember technology 20, 30 years ago. It was not ready for this. We could not be doing isolation and doing things like we're doing right now. We'd be mailing you floppies of this. Okay. So one of the things we're talking about during this whole course is your band is a business. So, and it's a startup business, because I'm assuming that most of you haven't got your Juno and your international acclaim yet, and are living on Easy Street. So if Drake didn't sign up, did he, Roland?
Drake didn't, but
no, he didn't, eh?
Their lawyers, right? We did interview Drake's lawyers.
We got his lawyers, but we didn't get Drake. So
I found this an interesting term. This runway term. Is that a business term? Is that they use?
It's a business term, runway, and it basically means the amount of time. It's like an airplane runway. It's the amount of time that you have before you have to do something else. So if you're actually if you're actually kind of making your living, or at least part of your living doing music, your runway is how long you can kind of hold out, and sometimes by losing money before you have to change your plan. So all startup businesses have that, and you hear people talking, oh, I have 3 months of runway, or I have 6 months of runway, and usually that means they have 6 months before they start making better money, like real money, to pay themselves and their employees and their suppliers. But for a musician, it's very similar. If you're,
I bet it's a very short window, because an independent musician, they make their money basically playing gigs. So the window could be very small for something like that, as opposed to someone who's a touring act, a major touring act that already has a track record and has sold a lot of albums, right?
Yeah, but they've got more expenses too. So sometimes it kind of balances out. It's a tricky equation, but take a look. If you're lucky enough to have some money in the bank, either from a side gig or from just prudent financial savings, that's great. Those will all add to your runway. So usually, one of the things in the music biz is often, even though your income might be variable, you can often really reduce your expenses to next to nothing and still be a musician and still be writing songs, still be practicing your craft. As long as you have kind of a day job to make sure that there's food on your table and you can pay the rent.
I agree.
You can have, so if you're, that's one way is to essentially have a day job that's not in the industry to increase your runway as a musician. The other way is to have enough success and enough sort of careful planning and saving for a rainy day that you can you can sort of downsize your costs. Maybe it's not realistic to have your jam studio anymore. Maybe you'll have to actually jam in your neighbor's garage or jam in your mom's garage or something. So you may have to change your cost base a little bit to stay afloat long enough that you can see yourself through this kind of crisis.
Right.
Okay, next slide. We've got a little mini lesson. We didn't want to leave you without any content today, we didn't want it to be just pontificating from the pulpit here. I wanted to talk to you a little bit about Google Analytics, and this is kind of what Google supplies you to take a look at what the activity is on your webpage, and it's super deep and super comprehensive. It's just, you can honestly get lost in the stats, but it's pretty exciting because there's almost nothing you can't figure out from how people are using your website. This is Google Analytics. Really, you have to kind of have a website. There's technically some possibility of putting Google Analytics components in like other websites, like websites that are repping you, or websites that have some of your stuff. But that's trickier and harder because you don't actually own the website. It's a lot easier. This is one of the big positives for having a band website, is that you can use that kind of as a coordination point for seeing how the traffic is flowing in and out, how people are making buying decisions, how people are navigating, where people get frustrated, where people get lost, where people decide, no, I don't want to do that,
right.
And where people decide, yes, I want to. So those are and also like when and everything. I'll show you some of the graphs. So it's pretty exciting. Use your website as a jump-off point for getting some super fine detail about how things are going. Okay, we're going to, just because it's super convenient for us, we'll show you the BandLaunch page. It's not a typical band page. It's a page for an education program to help musicians, which is a little bit different, but I think you can sort of read between the lines and take a look. Okay, so this is the sort of one of the main panels when you go to your Google Analytics page. What you'll see is over a certain time period, right down in the bottom left-hand corner, it says for the last 28 days, this has been in the activity on BandLaunch. So there's been 85 sessions with 60 users. So there's a lot of unique users compared to sessions. So there's only been 15 or so that's the difference there. Bounce rate of 44.71%. Compared to a commercial page, this is extremely good. If you're trying to if you're trying to sell somebody something, your bounce rate is often in the low 1 to 2% or less. People forget, and what that means is that's how quickly people say, no, that's not for me, and go on to the next thing. Having 44% of the people stick around long enough to do something active on the webpage means it's incredibly sticky. It means that the people we're targeting find that it's very useful, and this is sort of an extreme case. Partly because we targeted our marketing very closely, so that people, by the time they get there, they're already kind of pre-qualified.
So the reality is that to sustain that rate is not will be a lot harder, I guess.
It may be depending on where you're doing your fishing and how you're getting people into your site. I think since that was the last 28 days, this is just organic. This is just people who are finding us because they've heard of us through somebody else. We're not actually doing any active advertising on this. Just to keep in mind, the statistics would look definitely different. Actually, not that worse, but definitely different if we went through the full time period of where we're running this. You can also see here, I've gone to the next slide here. Where are your users, and when do your users visit? Kind of important. What do we have? We have United States, Canada, and I'm not sure where that. It looks kind of like Egypt. Oh, it's Israel. So apparently that's where who's interested in this. We advertise exclusively in Canada because this is a Canadian program. But in the last 30 days, this is the distribution. You can find all kinds of interesting things. One of the primary things you can find out is if you're finding that as a band, a lot of your interest is in a country you would have never thought of before, you can start amping up your marketing efforts and awareness efforts in those places. So I'll move on to the next slide. This breaks down. This is a breakdown of each page, each sort of sub page on your web page. Each of your web pages, and how many views each get, and how many active users. So it's extremely detailed. This particular graph is for the last 7 days, which is a very short window, and nothing like the long window that a lot of people would look at over several months to try and see sort of month-long trends. Okay, moving on.
To make up a graph like that, is it something? Is it a business or thing, or is it an economics thing, or is it more like a science thing or a computer generated thing? Or
the Google computers generate all these graphs for you, and they generate them pretty much continuously all day, every day. And you can go through and look at these trends across. Again, we've got 7 days here. That's kind of not particularly helpful, but you can look at them over over a lot of different time periods. And I'll show later on. We'll show you some longer time periods. This is one right here. So if we move to this next slide, there's a really long graph at the top that goes all the way from November to March, and this is a more detailed view of which pages were looked at and how many people were on for each page. Now you'll notice that right now in March we're at the end near today. At the end of this very long squiggly graph at the top, there's very little activity. But when we were first advertising for BandLaunch, when we were first signing up our main cohort around November, December, there was a lot more page views. They were closing in on 300 page views per day.
Wow.
You can see a breakdown of which pages they went to for information, which pages seemed to be interesting, how long they spent on each, average time on each page. 1 minute is excellent. That's something that's kind of extremely high. Most people don't have very much patience or attention. So if you've managed to grab somebody's attention for a significant amount of time, you've done extremely well. That's one of the. It means you've kind of captured their interest, and they're likely to be eager to further interact with you, which is kind of what you want as a band or as BandLaunch. Okay, move on to the next one. Here's our Google Ads campaign. Again, this is all inside that one Google Analytics framework. Essentially one page. When you just type in Google Analytics, it takes you right to this for your website. This shows when we were advertising and how well the advertising worked. We had one significant campaign, Launch Your Band to Success. It shows specifically what the bounce rate was. Bounce rate was extremely low for that, 79%. CPC is cost per click, so it costs 77 cents for each of the people who clicked on that ad campaign. 558 people clicked on it to evaluate BandLaunch and see if it was for them. 3.38% went all the way to the download page, which was our application form. and you can sort of see kind of how the activity worked and how many users per day as the campaign progressed along. I find it very fascinating. You can pull out a lot of things that are very useful for designing future campaigns and for understanding how effective what your return cost is. Like say for example, if we were a commercial enterprise and we got money every time somebody downloaded a download page, we would have to calculate if 3.38% of our 558 people were actually paid the money, how much would we have to charge to justify or to get the cost per click?
The ad campaign, right?
Yeah, to pay for the ad campaign, and then how much profit would we have left over to run the rest of the costs?
It's interesting. This graph seems similar to the last one, but it starts peaking again, and not November but December. It seems to be almost very similar to the last graph.
It is, and I think one of
pushed up. I forget what's that called. That's called the curve, not the curve, but and graphs. It's called it's very similar though. The two graphs.
It is, and one of the reasons for that is because when we ran other campaigns in November. Remember, we ran Facebook campaigns earlier in November,
right?
And we only ran our Google Ads campaign later. So the activity. The activity in November that you see on the web page was largely driven by Facebook, and the activity in December and January were largely driven by Google Ads.
Okay.
So it gives you sort of an understanding. If you have a few sort of key events in there, the reason it didn't start, this graph doesn't start till December is because we didn't actually put it on till December.
Cool.
Okay. I think that's kind of the end of our quick tour through Google Analytics. You can go super deep. There's entire university courses on Google Analytics. Some of their algorithms are secret, but it's all very useful for understanding what's going on, what's working for you. You'll get to understand what is important for you, understanding how the crowd is responding, how your fans are responding. It's not always the same for everybody. But you'll understand your first ones. If you're looking for new users, new people, new fans, bounce rate's pretty important. Cost per click is important for you understanding the back end finances, and just your raw numbers, like how many people you're reaching with the categories, is really important for you for tuning your message, for who you're sending your message to, and what you're saying to get them to do the next thing. Okay, next thing we have our email grab bag. Roland, did you have anything that you wanted to bring up for that?
Well, I think one of the main things that we'll address, besides the fact that if you haven't sent me your mailing address, any of the students, because I'd like to send some stuff out, we'll have to see how it works in the next few weeks with the mail and things like that. But there only seems to be a group of 8 people that have sent me their addresses. So I want to mail it. We have T-shirts to mail out and coffee mugs, I think that's about it. And the other thing is to support digital broadcast. There's a lot of them out there, right? So you want to support your digital musicians.
Yeah. Yeah, I've noticed a few popping up. More than a few musicians, famous and not so famous, all doing live online shows. Okay. The last slide we have here is homework. I was just saying, keep in touch, and let's start using the BandLaunch Facebook to chat and support each other.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. Well, this has been a very unusual 9th week session, so keep in touch, and this is BandLaunch signing out.
Signing out. Bye-bye.